What's going on, guys? Balkan Architect here. This is part 2 of our topography and site design in Revit course. So in this part we're going to start off by talking about the property line. So as you can see here in this site plan, we have the property line over here. Now I show you how to change the graphics of the property line, but also some advanced tips and tricks and workarounds, so we can get here in the property schedule not only the area but also the surface area for our property. Of course, always your area and surface area are going to be different if your area has any slope to it. And as you can see here, especially in something like this, we have, well, quite a lot of slope. So that's why we have those two different ones. And also I show you how to kind of view it in 3D as well. So it's not only a 2D property line, but also a 3D property line. Moving on from that, I talk about the building pad. That's what you can see over here, and I just go over how these are constructed, edited, and modified. Then we go into site settings. Now, site settings is the menu that's over here on the model side that allows you to do some customization, and I show you some tips and tricks and workarounds for advanced customization. For example, here, as you can see, we have a very specialized way or graphics for this site plan. As you can see, we have some regular lines, we have some thicker lines, we have some dashed or dotted red lines, and also we have one blue line. So this is one line that allows you to kind of just mark out just one elevation on your whole topography. So I think this is really cool, and I really go in depth into how something like this is constructed. Moving on, I show you how to label contour lines. So here, if I zoom in, as you can see, all of these are labeled, and I show you how to adjust the label, change the font, change the numbering, things like that. So I show you how to adjust that, and then here we have those labels. And finally, I show you how to use Site Designer, and for the Site Designer, I show you my two favorite features, just because I consider this add-in a bit buggy, so it's not really developed completely yet, so it doesn't work really perfectly. So I show you two options that do work perfectly and which I do really appreciate. The first one is this over here, the option to create roads, and the second one is to create topography out of massing. So I've created this surface out of just as an in-place mass, so I went here and created an in-place mass, and then I used the Site Designer to convert this into topography. So if I go here into edit surface, as you can see, that's topography with all of those points, and it can be adjusted even further. So that's what I cover in the rest of this course. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get into the course. Now let's take a look at property lines. So property lines are a really useful tool that we have in Revit. Here on the Massing and Site tab, we have the property line option. Now we can't really use it in the 3D view, so I'm just going to switch from the 3D view into the site plan here on the project browser. Now the topography that we're going to be using is the one that we have created earlier when we were creating a topo surface from points file, and then we've simplified it a little bit. Now let's create a property line. So to create a property line, I'm just going to go here to, well, property line on the Massing and Site tab on the Modify Site panel. So you just click there, and then we have a couple of options. So you can either enter distances and bearing. Now this is only if you have really accurate information about the property where you're, well, creating your project. Now in this case, just because we don't really have that, I'm going to go with the option to create it by sketch. So once I'm here, let's say I want to have my building somewhere in this area over here. So I'm just going to do one line like this, maybe at 20 degrees or something like that. Next, let's do another line, just like this. And then let's do another one, and let's close it off in a rectangle. Now, once we have this property line, I'm just going to hit the escape key a couple of times. Now, as you can see, it's just another one of these magenta Revit lines. So exactly like we did for the subregion or for any floors or something like that. It's the same approach using the same draw tools. Now, once I hit finish, we're going to get this property line. Now, property lines have different types of representations in different areas. So usually, depending on your code, you're going to have a specific way of representing your property line in your plans. So what's a little bit of a problem with property lines is if you select this, you don't really have an option to change the line. And also, if you go here to the Manage tab, and usually you might be tempted to go here into Additional Settings and then go to Line Styles, you're going to find that if you open up the menu for Line Styles, you're not going to find that property line. So we don't really have any way of modifying the property line in the whole project. So property lines are just one of those things that have to be adjusted view specifically. Now, luckily, usually property lines are only represented in the site plan and perhaps a couple of more floor plans, so it's not that big of a hassle. So what you can do for your property line, you can go here to the Visibility Graphics Overrides and then go into Edit, and then let's search for our property line. We need to find the site, open that up. Here we go, property lines, and then you can override the line just by going over here, and perhaps you want to have something a bit different. So let's go maybe with these small dashes, or maybe the demolished line, or the hidden line, or you can use any one of these that you want. I'm just going to go with let's go with the demolished line, but I'm actually going to go with the color red, click OK, and then the weight, I'm going to go with something a bit larger, like 4. And then I'm just going to click OK, apply, OK, and as you can see here, we have a red property line that's a bit thicker than the usual lines in Revit. And this is also depending on scale. Currently, we're at 1:100, which is probably not the best scale for site plans, so you're probably going to be using at least 1:200, but more likely 1:500 or something like that. And now, as you can see, this looks a lot better. Now, what's really cool is you can actually schedule these property lines, but there is a little bit of a problem when it comes with taking information from property lines. And let me explain what that is. So if I just select this property line, here in the properties, like with most elements in Revit, we're going to have some data. Now here we have the dimension, and currently it says area, and that's 2,124 square meters. Now the problem with property, especially when you have a topo surface or topography or a terrain that has such differences in height, like this, it's quite of a slope. Usually you have two ways of measuring area. So you either have the surface area or you have the projected area. Now let me explain how that works. So here I have an image that shows a bit of topography. Now as you can see, a surface area is this blue rectangle over here. So that's the surface area in plan view. And then, or just the area, the projected area in plan view, and the surface area is this green rectangle over here. And the green rectangle is always going to have a larger area than this projected area rectangle. So if you want to have both of those, information on both the projected area and the surface area, well, you have to do a little bit of a trick. So let me show you how that works. For example, for this whole topo surface, if I select that, here underneath dimensions, we actually do have all of the information. So we have both the projected area and the surface area, and that's really useful. And here you can exactly see how much different they are. So this one is less than 50,000 square meters, and this one is 53,350 square meters. So that's actually a large difference in area, especially when you take into consideration that real estate actually has quite a bit of a cost. So how do we get that same effect for our property line? Or how do we pool that same information? Well, luckily there is a workaround that I found, and that's by using another one of these massing inside tools, and that's the sub-region. So I'm just going to go with the sub-region tool, and then I'm going to use the pick lines, and then I'm just going to pick these lines for our for our property line, hit finish, and there we go. Now here we can see that the area. So here, if I go into the properties, the projected area is 2,124. That means that the area that we have there in our just in our property line was this number, so that was projected area. But underneath here we have the surface area, which is of course really useful information to have. So that's a bit of a workaround. How can you get to that information? And also, of course, you can pull even more information out of this. So if I just go here to the View tab, I can create a schedule, and we can actually create a couple of schedules for your property line. So if I just go here to Schedule and Quantities, open that up. Now here you need to scroll down, and we don't really have property lines as such. So if I just go here to P, there is no property lines. What we need to do is go to Site, open up the menu, or expand the menu, and here we have two different versions. So we have property line segments and property lines. So first, let's try property lines. I'm just going to click OK, and then here we can include the area, we can include the name, we can name it later on, and that's pretty much all of the information that we need. So I'm just going to move the name up here, then just click OK, and there we go. So here we can click, and let's call it our property. There we go. So this is the area of our property. But it might be a good idea to have the option to export this table, including this information over here that we got using the subregion, and that's the surface area. So how do we add that to our schedule? Well, what we can do is go here to Fields and then Edit, and then we can create a new parameter, and we can call this one Surface Area. And let's change it from a length to area. There we go. It will just be an instance parameter. Click OK. There we go, surface area. And then I'm just going to click OK. And here we have surface area. And I'm just going to move this schedule, just undock it like this. Move it here to the side. And then let's just get this information. So that's 2,395. Let's click here. 2,395 point something. Let's see what that is. It's 965. Let's enter that number, 0.965, and there we go. Now we have an accurate schedule. Okay, close. Can we add that? Let's see. Okay, I guess it doesn't allow decimal places, or it doesn't view decimal places, but don't worry, we can actually fix that. So for decimal places, what you need to do is go here into formatting. Let's go to area, and then let's go to field format. And instead of using the project settings, we're just going to uncheck that and use also square meters, but let's just change it to 2 decimal places, and then click OK. And the same thing for your surface area. Go to field format, and then let's uncheck use project settings, just because project settings use meters without any decimal places. So let's just change that and add a couple of decimal places. Click OK, OK again, and now as you can see we have that we have those decimal places, and now we have a proper schedule that includes all of the information that we need to have for this particular property line. There's one more cool thing that I would like to show you that comes with creating these property lines like this, or actually using subregions in order to calculate the surface area of your property. So if I just switch here to the default 3D view by going here to the quick access toolbar, you're going to notice that our property is now visible in 3D just because we used that subregion. Now if I go ahead and delete the subregion, you're not really going to see that property line in 3D. So let me just go back so we can see the subregion. And actually what you can do as well is select that subregion and then right click in empty space, go to override graphics in view by element, and then here maybe we can change the projection lines. So we can use the dashed line, let's see, maybe the regular dashed line, and then we can even change its color and even change its weight to something like 4. hit apply, OK, and there we go. Now keep in mind that it would change all of those little lines, but it does differentiate your property from the rest of the model. So it is a cool representation of your property in 3D. In this video, we're going to be exploring the Building Pad tool on the Massing and Site tab. So here on the Model Site panel, we have the Building Pad tool. Now, the Building Pad tool, even though it's a part of the whole site modeling tools, it's not really being modeled in reference to topography, but in reference to levels. So what you need to do in order to position your building pad just on top of your topography, you have to check where are your levels in reference to your topo surface. So what I'm going to do in this case is just take a look at here where we have our property line. Let's say somewhere over here we want to place our building pad, and let's just see where is this terrain in reference to our levels. So for that, I'm just going to go with a section and just place a section over here just like this. I'm trying to go as parallel to the property line as possible, and I think this is quite accurate. And let's expand it a little bit just because the levels are somewhere over here, so we want them to be visible in the section. Okay, now it's time to open this section up, so I'm just going to deselect everything and then go to the section head and just double click. Now here we can see the topography that we have, and somewhere over here we're going to be placing our building pad, and as you can see, our levels are a little bit below that building pad. Now currently this section is in the 1 to 500 scale, so let's change that maybe to 1 to 200 just so we can see these a little bit better. So there are a couple of options we can do. We can select the whole topo surface and then just move it down a little bit so it's closer to our levels, or we can bring our levels up a little bit. So we can maybe move this up a bit. There we go. It's almost right. Let's see, let's do one more, bring it down just a little bit more. Okay, I'm happy with the way this looks right now. Okay, so let's go back into the site plan, and now we're going to be placing the building pad. So for the building pad, you just open this up, and then you get the sketch tools, just because this is another sketch-based element. And building pads are pretty much the same as your floors, or maybe some sort of a concrete slab that you can use for foundation. So you're just using those basic sketching tools. So I'm just going to place a simple rectangle like this. And then what I'm going to do with the rectangle is just go to the Modify tool to escape out of these Draw tools, select it, and then go into Rotate, and let's just rotate it by the value of 20 degrees, so it's parallel to the sides of this here, the property line. So I'm just going to hit Finish now, and there we go, we're done. Now, something that you're going to notice, this building pad here, it says it's currently at level 1. So let's see what that looks like in 3D. So I'm just going to go here to the default 3D view, open that up, and this is what we have. So if I zoom in over here, you're going to see that we have our building pad, and it's basically cutting into the terrain. And that's exactly what building pads do. They're built so they cut through the terrain. Now, maybe to see it a bit better, we can turn the shadows on, and now as you can see from the shading, we have an opening there in the ground. Now if I select the building pad, and make sure to select the building pad and not the topography, and even if you're having trouble making a selection, you can use the tab key to toggle selection, and there we go. Now we have our building pad selected. You can see only the bottom of this opening has lit up in this blue color, and also here in the properties it says pads. Now let's change the level from a level 1 to a level 2. So now, as you can see, now it's a little bit up. And something that you're going to notice with these building pads, they tend to either cut a hole in the terrain if the building pad is below the terrain, or they're going to build up the terrain a little bit. Just keep in mind that they are going to be building up the terrain vertically up. Now here, I'm just going to bring this down to level 1. We can place a basement here, and then on level 2 we can build our house up from there. Now for building pads, you can modify them just like any floor. So you can go here into edit type. Now currently we only have this one building pad, but as you can see here, we have the option to edit its structure. So we can go there and we can maybe make changes to the thickness. We can add a different material, and we can even change the function or even insert multiple layers. So you can add or build upon this building pad. I'm just going to cancel out of this menu just because I don't want to make any additional changes to this particular building pad. Now it's time for my favorite part, and that's customizing the graphics for our topo surfaces. So here for this topo surface, as you can see, we have a lot of these contour lines, and they do a good job of representing our topo surface and the whole depth and everything like that, but we can actually customize this quite a lot. So let's see how can we do that. Now most of this customization is located here on the Masking and Site tab, and then here underneath the model site panel we have this little arrow, this diagonal arrow, and that gives us the site settings dialog. Now if I just open that up here, we're going to see that dialog. Now here the first option that we have is the contour line display. So this is the line that's at intervals of 5 meters, and that's the basic contour line that Revit places. Now here sometimes you're going to see it, sometimes not. It's kind of hard to differentiate, especially when we have many lines like this. But as you can see, if I zoom in a bit further, you're going to notice that every 5 meters up we see this thicker black line. So that's that line. So if I go here into model site, that is the line that this whole dialog is referring to. Now here we have the option to set up the interval. So currently it's set up to 5 meters, but of course you can change that. You can change that to maybe, I don't know, 10 meters. And then I can just hit apply. And now as you can see, we have one here, but if I click OK, we're going to have another one that's at 10 meters up here. Now it's a bit hard to see like this. Maybe if I go in a larger scale, it's going to be a bit more visible. Now let's go back to the site settings. Now the next option is passing through elevation. So this is basically the height or the elevation at which these lines will start. At each the interval will start. So if I just add here maybe 2 meters, just give it a little bit of an offset and then hit apply, you will notice that this line will jump up. So if I hit apply, there we go, it jumps up by the value of 2 meters, or in this case by the value of 2 contour lines. So that's what that menu does. Next we have additional contour lines. Now in this case those additional contour lines are these ones over here. Now here, as you can see, we have this little table and we can actually add more lines. But first let's explore what does this table give us. So first is the option where we start. So we start at 0, and actually you can do something like -10 or something like that. You can make changes, but this is where the contour lines will start, and this is where they would stop at 1000 meters. Now for most projects this is going to be quite enough. Next we have the increment. Currently it's set to 1 meter, but let's say we want to change it. Let's try 2 meters and then hit apply. Now as you can see, the number of these lines was cut in half. And of course if we type in 0.5 meters, hit apply, now we have many more lines. Now I'm just going to bring it back to 1 meter. So there we go, hit apply, there we go, we're back to our regular view. Next we have the range type. So the range type is either multiple values or we can have just one value. What that means is, do we want to have these lines at increments, or do we want to have just one line at one place? So if you set it to single value, that will mean one line at one height, and this is going to be indicating that height. And if you set it to multiple values, well, then we get something like this. The increments just keep going until they get to the stop elevation. In this case, that's set to 1000 meters. Next, we have the subcategory. So this is referring to the type of line that's being used. So in this case, these are the secondary contour lines. We can set them up to be primary contour lines. And if I just set that up and hit apply, now you're going to see that we don't really see the change between the original contour line and these additional contour lines, just because they're both set to primary contours. I'm just going to set this back to secondary contour lines, and then hit apply. Now, one more really useful thing is to see what else can we add here. So we do have the option to add hidden lines. So maybe if we insert another layer here in this table, and then here, of course, let's make sure to change the single value, just because we don't want to have single value, we want to have multiple values, so it would repeat across the whole topo surface. Now, once we've set that up here, maybe we can set the increment at every, let's try 0.5 meters, and here we can set this up to hidden lines, hit apply, and nothing happened just because I didn't set up the start and stop. So the start, let's leave it at 0, and the stop, let's type in 1000, hit apply, and there we go. Now it works. Just because it was set to 0, basically it began and stopped at the 0. Anyways, now we have these dashed lines every half meter. Now, of course, you can change them. Maybe they can be every 2 meters. Apply. Now it looks like this, and so on and so forth. You can play around with this, maybe every 3 meters, hit apply, and there we go. So you can play around with these graphics and make it look really interesting, especially if you have really important way or really important reason for representing maybe a 3-meter increment or something like that. Now, if you're someone like me, you would like to customize this even further, so let's see how can we change some of these lines, because here we only have a few options and they're not that interesting. Now, usually you would be tempted to go here to the Manage tab and then take a look at the additional settings, and here we have the line styles, and underneath line styles, we don't really have any of those lines. We don't have contour lines anywhere here in the line styles menu. That's because they are located in the object styles. So let me just cancel out of this, just because those lines are not regular lines, they are part of some model lines. So just because of that, just because they are lines that represent this topography, they can be customized only here in the Object Styles menu. So you have to open up the Object Styles menu, and then scroll all the way down, find Topography, here we go, expand the menu for Topography, and then here we have those options, the hidden lines, the primary contour lines, secondary contour lines, and triangulation edges. Now, how do we add more lines here? So you can basically select any of these and then just click New, and then we'll get a new subcategory pop-up menu where we can name it. So let's just call it red contour lines or contours. Hit OK, there we go. Now, of course, these being red contours, we're going to change the line color to red. Click OK, there we go, and then we can also change the projection to something a bit thicker, something like 4, just so we can view it a bit easier, and then maybe change it from solid into dotted lines. Let's try 2mm dot. I think this would look interesting. There we go, and if I just hit apply and OK, there we go. We've added a new line to our menu. Now, in order to set that line up so it would be visible here on our topo surface, what we need to do is go back here to the Massing and Site tab, go to Model Site, open up that Site Settings menu, and here let's go ahead and change this here from secondary contours to red contours, hit apply, and there we go. Now these are red. Okay, but I've changed the one that's at 1 meter, so let's maybe cancel out of that. Let's go back. Let's try that again. So instead of changing the one that's at 1 meter increment, let's change this one, and let's maybe change it to 4 meter. So there we go, 4 meter increment, and instead of hidden lines, let's go with red contours. Hit apply, OK, and there we go. Now we have these red dotted lines that basically represent those 4 meter intervals. So that's how you can pretty much customize this infinitely to get a really accurate and a really good representation of your contour lines. Now, one more thing, let's just explore that singular contour line. So let's open this up and let's create a new one. So let's go to New. And here, this one will be just a single value, And because it's a single value, just to differentiate it a little bit easier, let's escape out of this, go back to manage, go back to object styles, and let's create a new one just so we can differentiate it a bit easier. So I'm just going to go down to topography and go ahead and insert a new subcategory. Let's call it blue line or blue contour. Click OK, and then of course this will be blue, or maybe this blue. Let's go with this. Click OK, and then for projection I'm going to go with something a bit thicker so we can see it a bit easier. Click apply. OK, there we go. Now let's go back to masking site, back to model site, and then let's insert that new layer, single value, but let's add some height to it. So let's do something like 20 meters or something like that. So here we can just do the start at 20 and then hit apply, and there we go, something has changed. Let's see where that line is, or did it appear at all? So that's going to really depend on the height of your whole topography. Maybe it's a good idea to go here into a section and just see what that looks like, or even an elevation, so south elevation perhaps. So yeah, the height of 20 would be at, let's see. Yeah, it should be visible here, so let's go back into 3D and see. Can we find that line? So it should be somewhere here. Let's go back and see, can we customize it a bit better? So here it's at 20. Oh, we didn't change the contour lines or the subcategory. So let's change it to blue contour, hit apply, OK, and there we go. Now it's visible. So we can see it over here. So maybe if the 20-meter height is a really important height for your project, maybe you can mark it out with that single contour line so you know where it is at all times. So there we go. Those are all of the site settings that you have over here on the, as far as the contour lines are concerned. Now let's take a look at some of these section graphics. So to explore section graphics, maybe it's the best option to just create a section through this. So I'm going to navigate here in the project browser to our site plan, and once I'm here, I'm going to do a section through this whole topography. There we go. Maybe expand it even further, just like that. And let's zoom in, double click here, and there we go, we have our topo surface. Now here in section, your topography is going to look kind of like this, and we can make some adjustments here in the site settings. So we have the option to change the material and then also the elevation of poach base. Now in this case we can't really see it just because let's set this to fine level of detail, and then also let's change the visual style to shaded, and there we go. Now we can see this is our section of our topography, and it looks kind of odd. Here we can see below our topography there is something in section, some earth in section, but if we go below here, there's pretty much nothing below. Now that's what's affected here by the site settings dialog. So here the height or depth of this is going to be determined by the elevation of poach base. So currently it's at 3 meters, and here as you can see this is the lowest level, so this is set to -3. But if I set it to -20 and hit apply, now as you can see this goes further down. Now I can try -30, hit apply, there we go, it goes even further down. And here we also have the section cut material, so you can change that from earth into something else, but I think in most cases earth will do just fine. And of course I like to change the cut pattern here for earth, so we can change the cut pattern to, well, the earth cut pattern, and then let's hit apply, OK, apply again, OK, and then perhaps if we go into hidden line, it should be visible, but we have to zoom in really far along, and there we go. Now we can see that hatch here perfectly displayed in our section. So basically that's how you can adjust the depth of earth in your sections, just by going here to site settings and then changing the material hatch or the material hatch in section, as well as the elevation of poach base. And also here we have just a couple of options of choosing the angle display. Is it degrees or degrees from north to south? And also are degrees decimal or minutes and seconds. Let's just cancel out of this menu, and there we go. Looking at a topo surface like this, we can get a lot of information out of these contour lines. And they are very useful, but sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you want to know the exact elevation of some of these contour lines, and it's tough to have to count from a certain point that you might know. So luckily, Revit has an option for that, and it's an option for annotating these contour lines. Now, to do so, we have to navigate here to the site plan in the project browser. So let's open that up. Here's our site, and then here we have the label continuous option, so contours option. So this is an option that allows us to add labels or heights of each of these contour lines. Now it works fairly simple. You basically select the tool, and then you have to make a line that's cutting through all of those contour lines that you want to, well, have labeled. So I'm just going to click here to start, and then click here to finish. Now once you're done with those two clicks, you go to modify, and you're pretty much done. And if you zoom in over here, you're going to see those numbers. Now in this case, just because of the scale, those numbers are quite small. So if we perhaps change the scale to 1 to 200, or maybe even 1 to 3 or 1 to 500, those numbers would be a lot larger. Now a problem that we have over here is first the orientation of these numbers, and second problem is the fact that the numbers are kind of odd. So here we have one that starts with 0, and then we have one that's at 1 meter, and then this one is at 1 meter again. So why is this? Well, for the model site here and the site settings, I have set the increment here at 0.5 meters, so that's every half meter. And these numbers are measuring in whole meters without any decimal places. So let's see how can we modify this. So basically you can select it, and of course at any point you can change this. So you can move it around, you can even just kind of rotate it around. So you can maybe place this here, this here, this here. So you can play around with it as much as you want, but at the end the numbers are still at the same orientation. So let's see how can we fix this. So just select it, and then here, as you can see, we have these contour labels. This is an actual family. Now you can go here into edit type, and then we can go to duplicate, and let's create a new family that will maybe be a bit better. So here for this new family, what I'm going to do is just type in a new name. So let's call it Balkan Architect Labels. Or maybe contour labels. There we go. Click OK, and now we can make some adjustments. Now the first adjustment that I always tend to make is to change the text font, and I'm going to change it to my favorite Century Gothic text font. Next is the size, and we can change that maybe to 2 millimeters. I think 1.5 is never enough. Next, we have some more options. So we have the options to make these numbers bold, italic, underlined. I'm just going to leave it as is. Next, we have the option to label only primary contour lines, and I don't want that. That would make it so that it only labels these black or these darker lines and not the rest of these. So that's not something that you want to have. And then we have one more option, and that's the units format, so we can actually change that. Now currently, if I open this up, it's set to use project settings. So basically it's using project settings which are set to meters without any decimal places. Now if I uncheck this, I can select here and I can leave it at meters, but I want to add a couple of decimal places just to make it a bit easier to read. And then click OK. Click OK again, and as you can see, now we can see these whole numbers. Now, if you're looking for rotating these around in order to see those better, well, in that case, unfortunately, I can't help you. This is just one of those very frustrating things about Revit where we can't really edit these. So these are just by default programmed to be facing downhill, and in this case the hill is facing that way, and they will always face downhill, and they will try to be as parallel with the contour line on which they're at. So as you can see here, these numbers are kind of in a weird order. Same thing will happen if I go here to Massing and Site and go with contour labels, maybe add some over here. You're going to notice that again they're facing in that direction. Now in this case, maybe select this and change it to Balkan Architect contour labels, but again it doesn't really fix that problem. Same thing goes if we place it somewhere else. Now immediately here in the properties, let's change this to our new style, but when I place it, it's still going to be oriented in that direction. So that's just one of those unfortunate things that we cannot change, at least not yet, but hopefully with the new updates of Revit, this will be fixed. Now let's take a look at Site Designer. So over here on the Site Designer tab, we have all of the tools that come with Site Designer. Now I find this tool kind of hard to navigate and not particularly intuitive or good even, but it can be useful in some cases. Now I found a couple of cases where this tool can be, well, very useful in comparison to the ways that we can approach editing topography and creating topography here on the Massing and Site tab. So I'm going to go here to the Site Designer, and the first thing that I'm going to be talking about is the topo surface conversion. So here, as you can see, we have the Convert panel, and the first option is to set a topo surface. This allows you to, well, take your existing topo surface. In this case, this is the file that I was using earlier on when I showed you how to convert a DWG file into a topo surface, and we can actually convert this into a file that can be edited by the Site Designer tools. Now that's simple enough. You basically go here to Set Topo Surface, and it will open up this Set Topo Surface dialog, and then we have to pick a basically pick a topo surface to edit. Now you just click here to pick, and then you select the topo surface that you have, and then you just have to click the escape key once, and there we go, we have created our topo surface. Now you just click OK, and then you get another pop-up menu. So here it allows us to name this topo surface. Now we can call it, let's call it a test topo. And then here we have the phase created. Now, just because we're not going to be doing any graded regions on this, I suggest we leave it just at new construction. And then we have an option for hiding original topo surface. Now, if you check this, what Revit is going to do, and let me just show you that, I'm going to check it and then hit apply. It's going to create a new topo surface over the existing one. Now, if I maybe select this topo surface and go here to temporary hide isolate, and if I hide this, just this element in view, I can go down here and reveal hidden elements. Now, these elements are hidden elements, so these are permanently hidden. These are temporarily hidden, and these are permanently hidden. So this is that original topo surface that we had. And if I just unhide that and then unhide this, so just reset temporary hide isolate, this is that new surface that we have created. Or maybe a better way to show this, I can just move this surface out of the way and then turn on temporary hide isolate, and as you can see here in the original position, we have that old topo surface. Now I'm just going to go back a couple of times just to move it back to the original position. Now, one of the most useful features that I found around this plugin is the topo surface conversion. So this allows you to convert a conceptual mass into a topo surface, and then later on you can edit that topo surface, which is really cool. So you can create an in-place mass just by going here to Massing and Site and then turning on Show Mass. And this will allow you to use some of the massing tools. Now, the massing tools are really useful. They allow you to create some amazing shapes in Revit, and it's really cool to have an option to convert those amazing shapes into a topo surface. So let me show you how that works by creating a new in-place mass. So I'm just going to create a new mass by clicking here on in-place mass. And for the name, let's call it mass for topo. There we go. I'm just going to click OK now. And there we go. Now we are inside of the massing environment. Now I'm just going to be creating that topo surface here next to our original topo surface. So I'm just going to go first into the site plan. I want to maybe place it here off to the side. And the first thing that I'm going to do is add some reference planes. So I'm just going to click here on reference plane, and then let's add one here, maybe add one here, and one here. Now, once we have these 4 planes in place, I'm just going to hit the escape key a couple of times to exit out of that command. Here, I'm going to rename them. So the first one will be reference plane number 1, the second one will be reference plane number 2, the third one will be number 3, and of course the fourth one will be number 4. Oops. There we go. Okay, so once these reference planes are created, I can go and just go into 3D, and now I can start placing some geometry on those reference planes. Now, in order to see those reference planes in the 3D view, what you can always do is go here to set reference plane, and then go ahead and change it from level 1 into that reference plane 1 that we have created. Now, still we can't see it, but if we turn on show work plane, as you can see now it highlights in the blue, and we can actually play around and place some geometry upon this. So what's really cool as far as all of these tools are, or my favorite tool, is the spline through points. So this allows you to create a spline through points, and later on we can convert this into topography, which is really cool. So I'm just going to create a few points and then create some shape that I'm happy with. So for example, something like that. Then I'm just going to hit escape once. Now let's change to another reference plane. So let's change to reference plane number 2. Now, as you can see, this one highlights, and then just make sure to have draw on work plane selected so you don't accidentally kind of connect to one of the other points. So here I'm going to go maybe like this, then hit escape key once. Then let's switch to reference plane number 3. So that's that one. So let's do something similar, but let's go down a bit earlier, hit escape once again, and then let's do one final one on that reference plane number 4. So you just select it here, and then here we can do some other shape, something like this, and then just hit the escape key a couple of times. Okay, so we have these 4 profiles that were built on those 4 reference planes, and now I can select one, hold the control key to add to selection, and then let's add the rest of them, and then let's just go and hit create form. And there we go. Now we have this wild shape created. It looks quite cool, and it would be difficult to model something like this as a topo surface. I guess it's not impossible, but it is a more intuitive way of modeling. Now, of course, this was just one approach. There are many approaches to massing in Revit, and I've just illustrated one of those. So we have a mass completed. It's just kind of a folded wavy sheet, and let's just hit finish mass. And there we go. So we have this in-place mass, and now to convert it into a topo surface, what you need to do is just go to your Site Designer tab, and then let's go to topo surface conversion. Now here we can go and name this topo surface, so let's call it topo from mass. Now the phase can be either existing or new construction. Let's just add it to new construction, and let's just go ahead and pick. And also let's hide the original. Let's go with pick, select this, convert, and there we go. Now it's doing its process, and there we go. We have a new topo surface. Now, something that you should keep in mind is that this topo surface was created by using many points, and we should probably simplify it a little bit. But as you can see, just from those contour lines, it looks really cool. I think it looks way more elegant than regular topo surfaces, but anyways, that's what you get when you convert it from an in-place mass. But anyways, let's now select this topo surface and go into edit surface, and you will see that it was, as you can see, converted from these points. Now, of course, I think you can probably recognize the problem. We have too many of those. So let's see how can we simplify this. Let's just go here to simplify surface, and currently it's set to 76.2 millimeters, I think. Now let's try something like 500 millimeters. Click OK. There we go. Looks a bit better, but I think we should take it a bit further, maybe 1000. Click OK again. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. Maybe we should try to go even further. Let's be bold. Let's try 2000. There we go. It still looks decent enough in my opinion, but we have many less points to work with, and I'm quite happy with that. And now I'm just going to hit finish, and there we go. We have completed this topo surface completely out of an in-place mass. And now you can use this for your projects, you can edit them, you can just use any of the tools and make any of the modifications that I have shown in the previous parts. Now another option that I find kind of useful with the Site Designer plugin are the streets. So you can create these streets that look a lot better than if you were just using massing and site and then maybe sub-regions to create streets. When you do that, they are pretty flat and they don't really have any thickness, and they're not streets, they're just changing the color of the topography. But if you want to create realistic streets, here on the Site Designer we can use the street tool. Now for that, let's go into the site plan. And then here, I've mentioned a bit earlier in the course that here in this project there was a road going like this. So let's try to do that using the Site Designer plugin. I'm going to go here to the Locate panel, and let's just click on Street. Now this is going to start up the Locate Street menu. Now these menus in the Site Designer look kind of similar. It doesn't really matter if you're trying to create a street or a soft terrain or a sidewalk or even a retaining wall. The menu will look quite similar. Now we have a few options. The first one is to select the street family. Now the one that's going to come just by default is the sample street. Now if you open up the drop menu, we don't really have anything else, but I don't really like using the sample street. But, so fortunately we can load in additional families just by going to this button with 3 dots and then opening up the kind of the little library that comes with Site Designer. So when you install Site Designer on your computer, this library will be transferred as well. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit and then let's see, what do we have? So we have some streets, and we actually have metric streets, which is useful because I'm using the metric system. So let's select one of those. Let's select the metric street and then hit open. Next we have the street type. So we have a few options. We have 1 lane and then curb and gutter. We have 2 lanes no curb, 2 lanes with curb and gutter, and 2 lanes with curb only. I'm going to go with 2 lanes curb and gutter, as that's what the road on the actual site is consistent of. So I'm just going to select that, and then here we have a name. So you can actually add a street name. Let's just call it the Balkan Architect Street. There we go. And then here we have the elevation, so you can elevate it a little bit above the terrain. Now if you choose the relative elevation from topo surface, that's going to, well, it's going to elevate it by the value that you enter here from any point here on the topo surface. Now if you were to use the constant elevation, it would just keep it at a constant elevation. So if the elevation is at 5 meters here, it's going to be at 5 meters here. And this is just the elevation from the actual topography, so I prefer using the relative elevation from topo surface. Now here I'm going to type in just a small number, something like 500 millimeters, just to elevate it just a little bit. Next we have multiple options for placing it. Now first you can place it in segments or in a chain. Now this being a road, of course I'm going to go with the chain option. And then also we have a few more options here. How can we place it? So we can create it either by using an existing host line. So if you had maybe some detail lines or something like that, or an underlaid CAD drawing, something like that, you could use that as reference and then just pick those lines and use that to create your your street. But in this case, because we don't really have that, I'm going to be using the draw host line option. And also here we have the radius for curves, and then it's set to 10 meters. Let's set it to something like 20 meters, just because there's enough space here for large fillets. Now I just click here on insert, and now we can place it. So you just come above here. Now make sure that you don't start from just beyond the topo surface, because it does tend to mess things up a little bit. The site designer prefers it to be within the start of the street, to be within your topo surface. So I'm just going to do the first click here, second click here, third click here, here. Let's do one here and one here. Okay, with this done, I'm just going to hit the escape key once, and that's going to start creating that street. So you just wait for a few moments, and as you can see, the street is slowly but surely being created. Now we can go back to the 3D view, the default 3D view here, and as you can see, we have a pretty nice looking street. Now the benefit of the site designer in comparison to the maybe the subregion tool, and let me actually demonstrate that. Maybe that's the best idea to show this. So I'm going to go here to subregion, and then let's create a subregion using a spline. So I'm just going to do a simple road. It's not going to be quite accurate. Hit escape, go back here into spline, and let's just do a similar line here. There we go. We can call this a road. Hit escape once again, and then I'm just going to do a simple line to close this off here, and to do the same thing here. Now again, if you're having trouble connecting these, just use the tab key. And now I'm just going to hit the escape key a couple of times just to exit out of the draw tools, and then let's just hit finish. And let's go back into the 3D view, and let's change the material here to, well, some same asphalt material. Let's see. And we have the kind of the light gray pavement. Let's load that in, hit apply and OK, and there we go. So as you can see immediately, you can notice the difference. This looks way more realistic. It has these edges, and especially if you go here to the site plan and then create a section going through these two roads. There we go, we have a little section. Let's open it up by double clicking here on the section head. There we go, one road looks like this. So we have that kind of the cut into the ground. We have the little gutters here and the little sidewalks. We have the main road, and it's actually kind of split in half, so the water could drain to each side, which is really useful. And then on the other side we have nothing, so it's just a flat line. So there we go. That's why I tend to use this site designer for roads. Now some of the other tools that come with the site designer are kind of buggy and non-intuitive, so I just don't tend to use them very often, or pretty much at all, but roads are pretty cool. Also, one more thing to show you for roads. Let's go back into the site plan. You can actually make roads that connect to this. So let's maybe select this and get rid of it by hitting delete. There we go. And then let's add an additional road over here. So I'm going to go here to street, and then I'm going to save the same family, but here I'm going to add a one lane road, and let's call it Balkan Architect Street 1 lane. Maybe like that. And the elevation, now in this case, elevation should be kept at 0. Just from experience, if you try to connect it with this road, it's going to try to position itself half a meter or 500 millimeters above that road, which is usually not what you want to have. So for this adjacent road, I'm just going to leave it at 0 as far as the elevation is concerned. And then here again, I'm going to use the same setting for draw host line, and of course the same radius. Now I'm just going to click here on insert, and then start from the middle of the existing road. Then let's click again and again, and let's say this is enough. Now I'm just going to hit the escape key. Now here it says intersections were found. Do you want to create the intersection? So here the site designer is actually going to generate an intersection for this part. So that's kind of cool. I'm just going to click yes, and then we have to just hit finish, and now the whole adjacent street will be generated. So let's wait for a few moments. It does take a while, but the end result is worth it in my opinion. And there we go. Let's just hit close, go into the 3D view, and there we go. As you can see, it does adjacent this street, and we have this little kind of fillet. Now, as you can see, it's not perfect. It tends to do things like this. That's why I don't use it very often, and that's why I don't want to kind of go through the other tools, because they are a lot worse than this one actually. So Site Designer, it's a useful tool, but not always. Only for certain situations, like this one here for roads, or for generating topography from massing, such as this one over here. Okay, so that is going to cover this part 2, and to conclude the site and topography course in Revit. So I hope you have learned many new things. If you have any additional questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section for this Patreon post, and I'll be back with another interesting advanced Balkan architect course in the next week. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.